On the broadcast tonight, it is official. Chinese President Xi Jinping will make a two-day state visit to Seoul next Thursday, marking the first time in more than 2 decades for a sitting Chinese leader to visit South Korea before traveling to North Korea. Local media in Japan are reporting a new government draft on Prime Minister Abe's push for collective self-defense has received coalition support and could be approved as early as next week. Korea's industrial output fell by the most in more than 5 years in May, missing market expectations by a long shot and adding to signs that the economic recovery may be losing steam. And Asia's World Cup experience comes to an end with barely a whimper. Team Korea leaves Brazil with its head down, becoming the fourth of 4 AFC representatives to get knocked out of the group stage without a single win. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red roses.
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 6 a.m. in Sao Paulo, and 6 p.m. on Friday, the 27th of June here in Seoul. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. The Chinese President Xi Jinping is coming to Korea.
Right, South Korea's presidential office says China's first couple will arrive in Seoul on July 3rd for a 2-day state visit. Well, it will be the Chinese leader's first visit to the nation since taking office last year. And unlike his previous overseas trips, President Xi will not be making any stops in other countries. Of course, President Park visited Beijing in June of last year.
It's also unconventional for a Chinese leader to visit South Korea before first visiting Beijing's traditional ally, North Korea. During their talks next Thursday, Presidents Park and Xi will assess their strategic partnership and cooperative measures for dealing with North Korea's nuclear issues.
Well, in what's become a regular occurrence of late, North Korea launched 3 short-range projectiles into the East Sea Thursday afternoon. However, unlike other recent tests, this one centered on a new type of missile that South Korean authorities say had never been fired before. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
North Korea claimed Friday that the 3 projectiles it fired into the East Sea on Thursday were newly developed state-of-the-art precision-guided missiles. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was at the scene on Thursday and watched over the launch process. The missiles were airborne for around 190 kilometers before landing in waters between North Korea and Japan. The projectiles bear a similarity to North Korea's KN-09 missiles, but the maximum range was 40 kilometers, further than a KN-09.
The primary goal of North Korea's every activities regarding the threatening other neighboring countries, particularly towards Seoul and Washington, is to stabilize or solidify the Kim Jong-un regime's survival. They want to make a new pressure toward getting back to the 6-party talks, the so-called denuclearization process.
In February and March, Pyongyang fired off ballistic missiles and short-range projectiles on 8 separate occasions. In March and April, the regime conducted numerous naval exercises near the northern limit line, increasing inter-Korean tensions along the border. Some experts say the most recent firing was initiated to unite North Korean troops behind Hyun Yong-chol, who is the new minister of the People's Armed Forces, after Chang Jong-nam was relieved of this post.
In one way, it could be seen as a test of the military's missile capabilities. It could also be a way to check the response times of the U.S., South Korea, and Japan.
Following this latest test firing, the South's Defense Ministry says it's on alert for additional provocations from the north. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The diplomatic dynamics in Northeast Asia are complex, to say the least, with historical and territorial differences meeting head-on with security concerns. But North Korea and Japan have been cozying up as of late, and our Connie Kim reports on the latest developments.
9 Japanese nationals are in Pyongyang through next Thursday to pay their respects to relatives who died in North Korea after the Second World War.
After a lot of efforts between the Japanese and North Korean government, our hope has finally come true.
There have been 8 visits like this one since 2012, but yesterday's comes against the backdrop of a new dynamic in Sino-Japanese relations. That is, since North Korea and Japan agreed last month to reopen an investigation into the whereabouts of Japanese abductees kidnapped by the North decades ago. Diplomats from Tokyo and Pyongyang will meet in China next week to discuss the details of a probe into the abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. North Korean officials are set to explain how a special committee plans to carry out its investigation. Now, if Japan feels the North is doing enough to reopen the probe, unilateral sanctions imposed by Tokyo on the North Korean regime could be eased, including the lifting of a ban on North Korean vessels into Japanese ports. Interesting timing, given that Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to visit Seoul next Thursday for a 2-day state visit. And he is not expected to stop by Pyongyang, going against the tradition that Chinese leaders have made it a point to visit the North before coming to Seoul. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Japan has come up with a final draft for a reinterpretation of its pacifist constitution that paves the way for reaching a consensus on the change, which Kyodo News Agency says could come as soon as July 1st. The draft says Japan will ensure that its history as a pacifist state continues while adhering to its non-nuclear principles and pursuing robust diplomacy to stem the emergency of threats. Japan has long maintained that it has the right to collective self-defense under international law, but cannot exercise it under Article 9 of its constitution, which bans the use of force to settle international disputes and only allows the minimum for self-defense.
Well, armed U.S. aerial vehicles are patrolling the skies above the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. Pentagon officials say Predator drones have been deployed to protect the city, which is considered the crown jewel for Islamic insurgents that are sweeping through the country. Now, the U.S. says the unmanned aircraft are intended to protect U.S. military assessment teams on the ground in Iraq. The New York Times, citing an anonymous U.S. official, reports that Iran is also flying surveillance drones over Iraq and sending military equipment there to help the government in its fight against ISIL militants. Well, we now have the names of all 16 teams that are staying behind in Brazil for the remainder of the World Cup 2014, and no, Korea is not on that list. Well, the Tech Warriors lost their final group match against Belgium 1-0, packing up with a draw and 2 losses and not a single win.
Well, the Belgians are a really tough team. Well, Arirang News' Song Ji-san joins us for a wrap-up of Korea's or Asia's disappointing performance on Latin American soil. So, Ji-san, so much of the Korean show that's been going on, we did not have any miracles. We were expecting some disappointments, so not much of a shocker there, right?
No, we needed a lot of conditions to be met for Korea to advance next round. We had to beat Belgium by a massive victory, but these was faded as Korea lost 1-0 and Algeria drew 1-1 with Russia on Thursday. Now, coach Hong Myung-bo finally changed his mind to put Kim Si-duk as the lone striker in his lineup and even replaced goalkeeper Chung Sung-yoon with Kim Seung-gyu. Kim actually fared pretty well on his World Cup debut, but lost a goal as Belgium's Jan Vertonghen nets after Kim failed to hang on to a shot. Now, just before the end of the first half, Belgium's Steven Defour was sent off for stepping on Kim Si-duk's ankle, but the Korean footballers couldn't take advantage over the 10-man squad.
Well, you know, Korea's coach Hong Myung-bo, I'm sure he has plenty to chew on. When he returns home on Monday, he'll have lots of questions. And to answer, like, were the best 11 really the most ideal roster for the Korean squad?
Well, I guess when he was submitting the roster, I guess he was waiting for that one shot from Park Ju-young, who brought home bronze from the London Olympics 2 years ago with a goal. But that old, rather outdated magic did not work here in Brazil. Park, who's been sitting on the bench for most of the time in his club, started Korea's first true critical matches only to go unnoticed the whole while. If you can see, Park leaves Brazil without a single goal or run on the goal. The other two players who are playing in the domestic league replaced Park in the second half the first two matches. Lee Gun-ho, serving in the military playing for the army team's Hangmu, scored while playing less than a half, and the tall Kim Shin-wook did well fighting off the Algerian and the Belgian players for the ball. And Korea's young midfielders who play in the European League showed greater potential than Park. Son Heung-min scored his first World Cup as the youngest player on the squad, and Captain Koo Jae-ter also played his part as Ki Sung-young backed up the strikers.
Well, this is a really young team, and we need to remember that in 2002, that was when we had a breakout year. We can't expect all the teams to live up to that expectation, but let's dig in and find out what actually did not click for this Team Korea.
Well, actually, it was easy for the opponents to analyze our lineup because there wasn't too many changes. But on the other hand, the Belgian team, they had changed 7 new members for this Belgian-Korean match just this Thursday. So that was a turn off for the Korean team. And for this result, Korea's performance in Brazil 2014 is the worst result since the 1990 France World Cup. But as you said, we are not the only Asian team leading Brazil with our heads down. In fact, Asia will not be represented in the round of 16, and without a single World Cup championship in 24 years, the region's quota could be at a risk. Now, there are quite a lot of analysis of what went wrong and why the Asian squads did not fare well in this year's World Cup. For one thing, people are saying, or experts are saying that the Asian squads are only trying to catch up with the European squads, but they're advancing and evolving at a faster pace than the Korean or the Asian squads are trying to catch up with them. And as we saw in the matches, their physicals were not up for the standards of those top players in the European and South American squads. And I also think playing in the farthest continent from their homes was also a factor, because we saw that the South American countries, they did really well. Almost all of them advanced to the next round.
Right, all but Ecuador. And Ji-sun, you mentioned that the Asian teams were looking to the European teams in their strategy making or football playing, but we actually did not see the European teams doing very well in this World Cup, so perhaps we need to advance to another level. So we'll leave the past in the past and we need to look to the future. So the best of 16 now, how do the games roll on for them from now on?
We now have the final lineup for the round of 16, and there are no matches on this Friday to keep the top 16 a day to rest and to prep for the knockout stage. Now 4 teams from the host continent, South America, start the second stage with Brazil versus Chile at 1 p.m. on Saturday local time. But Luis Suarez would not be playing for his national team as the World Cup 4 was banned from 9 international matches for biting an Italian opponent in the last match. Now on Sunday, the top scoring squad of the Netherlands at 10 goals right now will go against Mexico. And you guys should see if Mexico's goalkeeper Guillermo Ochoa can keep the scoring Dutch players at bay.
Well, for Korea, this was a disappointing end to a very disappointing World Cup. But the game should get much more exciting as we head into the knockout stage.
We have 2 more weeks to catch up with the world's best players playing in Brazil, so let's keep our eyes tuned to Brazil.
Right, this is a time for us to cheer for Team Korea, for the future Team Korea. We had youth, but no depth, but that only means we're in a transition phase. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ji-sun.
Thank you.
Well, Team Korea's early exit from the World Cup is a bitter pill to swallow for all of its supporters. And
although many knew at the back of their heads, I'm sure, that making it to the next round was a long shot heading into today's game, the Red Devils turned out in a force for watch parties nationwide in hopes of a miracle. Our Shin Se-min was out on the streets of Seoul.
Upset about losing the match against Belgium, Korean fans left the last cheering venue for the Brazil World Cup with their heads held low. Korea's elimination also spells the end to all Asian hopes in the tournament. Thousands of fans had been cheering on the streets in front of COEX in southern Seoul since early Thursday evening, some 10 hours before the kickoff. The fans, hoping a red card for Belgium in the first half would make it easier to win, couldn't hide their disappointment after the game.
I thought we had the advantage when I saw the Belgian player get a red card. I really think we could have done a better job.
Even against a Belgium team down to 10 men, the game didn't go well. The result is very regrettable. I wish there was another chance.
The fans spent all night waiting, and pre-game K-pop performances were held at the venue to keep the early birds motivated and entertained. With the fall of the national team in Brazil, some supporters are already looking ahead to the 2018 World Cup.
It's a great shame we didn't make it to the last 16. Now we'll just wait for the next World Cup in 4 years' time.
Failing to advance to the final 16, Korea will have to go again in 2018 World Cup in Russia. The fans had fun, and everyone thanks the squad for trying their best in Brazil. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Well, Korea's production in the mining and manufacturing sector dropped last month by the biggest margin in more than 5 years, raising concerns of a slowdown in economic recovery.
But analysts say it's still a bit too early to call the drop a trend. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us why.
Korea's pace of economic recovery is in question once again, with the nation's output in the manufacturing and mining sector falling 2.7% in May from a month earlier. That marks the biggest drop since December 2008 when the global financial crisis broke. Statistics Korea says that the dip came largely from the automobile and semiconductor industry, which saw sluggish exports last month, but added that the weak data does not necessarily mean the Korean economy is losing momentum.
The dip in exports are mainly due to fewer working days in May, prompted by long holiday weekends, while exports to Southeast Asian nations also remained poor.
In fact, while Korea's overall exports dropped 1% last month from a year earlier, the average daily export volume rose 6% to around $2.2 billion, the second highest level in history. Looking forward, experts also say it's likely that the Korean economy will remain on the track to recovery thanks to the U.S. economy, which has a huge effect on the nation's exports.
Although the first quarter growth in the United States was held back by an unusually cold winter, recent employment and consumption data are showing a firm upward trend.
And the nation's output data was not all negative. Service sector production rose 0.6% in May from a month ago after declining more than 1% in April. Retail sales also rose 1.5%, a sign that the economy might be out of the sluggish private spending trap brought on by the deadly ferry disaster. Although it added that more research is needed, the statistics agency said the Korean economy hit a low point sometime in late 2012 or early 2013. And based on that analysis, the economy should now be on a rebound trend. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And it's time now to get a recap on the week's domestic headlines.
Our Yurian is here with us.
Good evening now. President Park Geun-hye's decision to turn down Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's offer to resign after 2 failed attempts to appoint a new prime minister was dealt with heavily by the today's papers. You see Prime Minister Chung Hong-won on the front pages here. And let's take a look at the JoongAng-ilbo, which published a political cartoon that pokes fun at the entire ordeal. You can see Prime Minister Chung's legs on the right and President Park on the left holding a shovel. Now, it looks like she has just dug him out of a deep hole, and she's seen cheering him on, but in a meek voice and timid manner. The papers have questioned whether Chung will be able to overcome his mishandling of the Seoul ferry disaster and carry out reforms after already having offered his resignation. Now moving on to 동아일보, and the headline here reads, From Facebook to Book, Age of Snug. Now, the word snug is a word that combines SNS and book, and the article says that popular pieces of writing from social networks are being published into books and actually becoming bestsellers, giving birth to the word snug. Now, this week, the second best-selling item on a major online bookstore was actually a snug. Now, it consisted of Facebook postings compiled by a young man in his mid-20s. Now, publishers say by looking at the number of likes and comments a post gets, they can actually predict how well the books will sell. The paper also adds that it's a win-win for up-and-coming writers as well, who can better attract investors to help them publish a book. Now moving on to 조선일보, which has a story on Korea's main financial district. The headline here reads, a young mind marching out of Yeouido. Now, Yeouido is an area in Seoul that is Korea's equivalent of Wall Street, and the article says the financial district is losing young business minds. Now, zooming in closer, taking a look at the graph here, the darker line in the graph shows the falling proportion of those in their 20s and 30s, while the lighter line below shows the rising proportion of 30 and 40-somethings. This is because companies are cutting down on new employment or choosing not to hire anyone at all, as they see their profitability falter due to the slowing economy. Now, naturally, already employed 20 to 30-year-olds feel more of a burden on their shoulders. Now, this here on the right is a resignation letter from a 30-year-old man who says he spent all day doing paperwork for all his co-workers who are over 40 years old, and says he decided to leave because he simply sees no future in Korea's financial industry. Now, that does it for this week's look at some of the eye-catching stories in the Korean press.
Well, thanks, Leanne, for that. Those are what's making headlines here in the South. But here's a piece of news that probably will never make the headlines in North Korea, that the economic gap between the South and the North is only growing bigger.
That's right. That despite the North Korean economy being in the black for the 3 straight years now, data from South Korea's central bank shows the North's nominal gross national income was roughly $33.3 billion last year, which is around just 2.3% of South Korea's GNI. And while North Korea's growth rate last year was 1.1%, it represents a drop of 0.3 percentage points from a year earlier, mainly due to contraction in the construction sector.
Remember that new Hollywood comedy, dealing with an assassination plot against North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that we discussed a few weeks back, right?
Right.
Well, it's caught the attention of Pyongyang.
And the reclusive stage has a warning the release of the film,
which we did mention that it was due out this fall.
Right, as it would be labeled an act of war by North Korea. The co-director of the movie says Pyongyang is overreacting.
So will the film hit the theaters? Well, here's our Kwon So-ah.
Could a comedy movie trigger a war? According to our North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson, yes. North Korea has come out all guns blazing against the first-ever American movie dealing with its leader, Kim Jong-un. The Interview is an action comedy that centers on how a talk show host and his producer, played by James Franco and Seth Rogen, embark on a CIA mission to assassinate Kim. Rogen, who also co-directed the movie, says he was inspired by journalists making trips to the communist country and hypothetical discussions on how they would be in the ideal position to assassinate the world's most dangerous people. But as can be seen in the trailer, the movie is hardly sinister in nature. However, it was enough for North Korea to call the movie an act of terrorism and an act of war. Pyongyang's foreign ministry spokesperson threatened merciless retaliation if the film is released. Seth Rogen is not taking the threat too seriously. Upon hearing of the North's reaction to the teaser, Rogen tweeted, "People don't usually want to kill me for one of my movies until after they've paid $12 for it." Days before the North's threat, Rogen had tweeted, "Apparently Kim Jong-un plans on watching The Interview. I hope he likes it." The Interview is expected to hit big screens in the US in October. No word yet on whether it will be released in South Korea. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Well, it was a scorching hot day here in the nation's capital.
Let's now turn to our Michelle Park for a look at the weekend outlook. Michelle?
TGIF, everyone. We had wonderful weather all across the nation today with hot temperatures, but there will be huge drops in them into the night, so make sure you are aware of that. And showers are also expected throughout the central region on Saturday with cooler daytime highs. Now going over to our temperature readings, so we'll start off the morning at 20 and reach up to 27 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 31 and 27 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 25, Dokdo in the low 20s, while Mangungang tops into 24. And as for the weather conditions at the World Cup in Brazil, on and off showers have been an issue in the recent days. But there is no rain in the forecast for Saturday's game, although the hot temperatures will stick around. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Well, that's all from us for this week. Wherever you're watching, whoever you're cheering for, happy cheering, and have a good rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Ganyang too. Those of you in other parts of the world have a great start to your day. And we hope to see you right back here, same time, Monday evening. Bye-bye.